Hi, welcome back to Deadly Affirmations, the video book. Today we're going to read the first part of Chapter 14, and Chapter 14 is entitled, Leave Your Comfort Zone. Instead of enjoying a pleasurable day at the fest, Detective Williams spent most of Saturday at the station working on the newest murder. And while he added fact after fact to the thickening dossiers he was compiling on the 6 murders, he had learned very little. After 9 hours of shuffling data in hopes of seeing some sort of correlation among any of the details that had been collected in any of the cases, and seeing none, he went home, got himself stupefyingly drunk, and woke up Sunday morning to the ringtone of his phone. Detective Williams ignored the phone. After a while, the ringtone stopped. He smiled to himself and rolled over, scrunching up the pillow. The phone began ringing again. Williams intended to wait it out when there was a beep and a message was left. He heard a disembodied voice say, "Detective Williams, this is Chief Sproles. There has been another murder. This woman was at the fest yesterday. Please come to the station as soon as you get this message." Another? Shit. Williams hit the phone icon, hit recent, punched the top number, and the call went through. "Chief, Detective Williams, I'll be in as soon as I put on my pants." Williams hung up and realized that he probably shouldn't have mentioned his lack of pants to the chief, but damn, he was groggy and more than a little hungover. And it was Sunday, damn it. Lee slept all day. To be fair, she didn't get home from the after party until 6 a.m. after she and Bree had gone out for breakfast. Wheezy picked up the paper and saw the first article above the fold, "Murder Fest." "And that makes 7, she said, and took a sip of her tea. The little fibers of the all-bran pushed against a handful of plump blueberries bobbing in a pool of milk in her bowl. She pushed her spoon into the bowl and filled it with cereal, lifted her breakfast to her mouth. 5 fat blueberries lying in a bowl, but who cares? They're not sausages, she sang softly, and opened her mouth and added, "Look out, stomach, here it comes." Gerald Simpson and Billy Simpson had been cousins. Well, River City was a small town. Gerald wasn't close to being married, and no woman in the county would ever admit that Gerald could have fathered any of her children. Gerald was a petty thief, smash and grab mostly, spending any money he could get from his loot on his system and drugs. Most anything he could ingest. It was rumored that the floor of the passenger front seat of his car was usually littered with pills, and the police department forensic guys did find 4 or 5 dozen pills, everything from muscle relaxants to stool softeners to blood pressure meds to estrogen to thyroid meds to codeine to Xanax to Ambien to Lasix to Sudafed to expired Cialis to Midol to capsules for gout and even anti-itch tablets. For all his faults, Gerald was an excellent host. The fortunate folks who rode shotgun in Gerald's little car were always invited to take whatever they liked from the floor and enjoy. He lived on other people's couches mostly, and when those folks threw him out, usually after they found their medicine cabinets rifled, he had a little cabin out past his cousin's house where he could hide or be found if there was something in it for him. Were the 2 murders connected? Were they drug-related? Gerald certainly might have been, but Billy hadn't been known for drinking even a little, much less taking any kind of drug. His money, his time, and his energy went into his truck. Nothing made much sense. Later, Detective Williams got the coroner's report. While there might have been a lot of pills rolling on around on the floor, Gerald had died without their help. Somehow he had ingested some sort of organophosphate mixed with elemental mercury. One would have probably killed him, but the 2 together signed, sealed, and delivered him to the other side, postage paid. The coroner put a post-it on the cover of the report to put it all into English for Detective Williams. "It's an extremely painful way to die. The deceased suffocated because he was paralyzed." Williams looked over the detailed report. Dr. Baxter knew his business, and he knew that most people not in his business were fucking clueless about anything having to do with science. So as long as Detective Williams had been working in River City and investigating murders, Dr. Baxter stuck little explanatory notes on rainbow-colored post-it notes throughout his reports in order to help the halt and the lame on the path to forensic enlightenment. Today's notes individually noted the symptoms that had led Dr. Baxter to his diagnosis of the cause of the subject's death. Dr. Baxter was insistent that Williams understand how he came to the conclusions that he did. The doctor had begun looking at the body, clothed and unclothed. Even before Gerald's corpse was stripped and the first cut made for the necropsy, Dr. Baxter found that as Gerald died, he drooled, sweated profusely, vomited, pissed himself, and had a violent episode of diarrhea. An investigation of his eyes showed that he had cried and that his pupils were constricted. Dr. Baxter added 3 post-it notes to this section of the report. The first, a lovely powder blue one, had an acronym printed on it in bold letters, SLUDGEM, sludgem. Written in tiny black letters underneath the acronym were salivation, lacrimation, urination, defecation, gastrointestinal motility, emesis, meiosis. A second, a light orange one, had the acronym MUDDLES, and in smaller lettering, meiosis, urination, diarrhea, diaphoresis, lacrimation, excitation, and salivation. The third post-it note was written in a careful, precise cursive, organophosphate poisoning. On the following page, there were 4 post-its, stuck one on top of the other, giving other clues to the puzzle of Gerald's demise. Smell black tea, elemental mercury poisoning on the top one. S for salivation, ME, membranous colitis, LL, lens deposition on the next. Black line on gums on the next. And T, tremors intentional. E, erethism. A, acrodynia on the last. After a thorough reading of the explanatory paragraphs in the body of this section of the report, Detective Williams understood that lacrimation referred to tears, motility was a fancy name for cramps, emesis meant throwing up, meiosis referred to constriction of the pupils, diaphoresis was sweating, excitation had to do with increased heart rate and being unable to catch one's breath, membranous colitis was an inflammation of the colon, lens deposition had something to do with protein deposits on the lens of the eye, erethism was an abnormal mental excitement, and acrodynia referred to the pinkish discoloration of the hands and feet. On a small lime green post-it at the very bottom of the page was simply printed, delusions and hallucinations. Poor Gerald suffocated, spewed something out of every hole he had, and was terrified by frightening visions as he died.